Okay, hi everyone. You are watching the week 3 lecture video for the ALEC 341 podcasting class. And here's what you will need to do this week. Read chapters 2 and 3 from our podcasting book. Continue to research our topic. You heard from Dr. Jennifer Clark last week about the quantitative life science initiative. Quantitative because it's big data, lots of numbers and statistics, not qualitative, which is actually the opposite, which is more of the interviews and contextual analysis, conceptual analysis of things. So make sure you're researching what is QLSI. There's a list of names that I have in Canvas that I'm sharing with you that she has recommended we conduct our podcasts with. Make sure you're researching those people, and we're going to be assigning them in class this week. You will select your two podcast interviewees, and we will keep working on our interview questions and things from there. So, as you're continuing to research that topic and read through those list of names, I'd also like you to listen to the streaming science podcasts from the couple of years last year and the year before. I have a SoundCloud page where all of the podcasts live. I will post links to those for you to listen to. Last year, our topics were women in STEM. So you'll see that was a series of podcasts. And then also, we focused on agricultural economics and worked with economists from the Ag Econ department. So kind of listen to a variety of those and see what you think about the formatting, the sound, the content. Start seeing what's going to sort of be expected of you to complete this semester. So I'll have that link in this week for Canvas. And then also due January 30th is your online activity number 2. So don't forget to do that. As you can see by this meme, Anchorman is one of my favorite movies of all time, and we're doing some broadcasting this semester, so I thought that's somewhat appropriate. All right, so chapter 2 is what you should be reading this week. It talks a lot about setting up your studio, setting up your equipment, setting up your recording technology and process. But he makes a very big statement and warning at the beginning of this chapter that audio quality is definitely important. You don't want to have crummy sound with lots of background noise or squeaking or squealing or low volume that's hard to listen to and understand. You have to have quality technology and quality audio. But if your content is terrible, if your content stinks, then it doesn't matter what the quality of your audio is, because if it's boring to listen to, if it's hard to follow, if it's not conversational, if it doesn't include all those qualities we talked about last week from the readings about what makes good content for a podcast, consistency, hosting, all of those things, if you don't have the great content, then the quality of your audio doesn't really matter, does it? Because no one's going to be listening anyway. So moving into the technology of recording podcasts, there's a ton of ways these days to record quality audio. Our phones can do so much for us. Our phones can do a lot of work and capture audio just fine. The bigger issue is going to become the microphone. So the chapter talks about, if you see in the middle here, what an audio studio would look like. We have one upstairs in the Ag Communications building that the Market Journal producers use for weekly radio programs they record. And it has some of this technology that you'll see here, the really important condenser microphones, as you see, that are very directional. They're very touchy. They would not be good microphones to take out into the field because they're microphones that work in sound padded rooms that are very directional. So those are studio quality microphones. You can see on the table there the switcher where they're controlling the audio levels as they're recording it into the computer. You see the headphones. The book talks a lot about you want the headphones that go around your ears that don't let sound in. Here on the left-hand side, you see a linear PCM recorder. That is a professional grade recorder that you might take out into the field with microphones with the left and right channel to record your interviews. You see on the right an app on a phone called audio recorder. That's also a perfectly fine way to record audio in the field. There are phone jacks you can buy if you needed to, like in the studio, see the phones on the wall, record phone interviews into the system. There are certain devices you can buy to plug those into switchers, that sort of thing. I'm much like the author of this book. I don't like to get bogged down on the technology side of things. Show me the technology you have, and we will find a way to make it work. It doesn't have to be the most expensive, high grade technology to have good audio, but the most important part of the whole thing is the microphone. Yes, you can put this phone on the table and you can just hit record and let it record sound, but it's going to pick up all the other sounds around you. It's going to pick up uh, all the background noise of the heater behind me clicking, just like this is right now today because I'm not using a microphone. Um, Practice what you preach, right? But I'm not using a microphone because I'm having computer issues with the microphone. Anyway, um, you know, you need to be aware of how to control your environment, how to control all the background noise. If you're recording a lot of podcasts in laboratories and things like that, there's often refrigerators running, the DNA machines shaking test tubes. There's always a lot of noise. If you're out in the field, literally out in the field, there are going to be airplanes flying overhead. There are always trucks driving down gravel roads, tractors, all of that. So you need to find a way to control your environment so that you get good, clean sounding audio. So know the difference between microphones. Okay, so this diagram here of the microphone with the circle around it, that would be an omnidirectional microphone if it was recording everything in the circle around it. So see the 360-degree circle. And the book says do not buy the omnidirectional microphones because those are the kinds that you would just like sit on the table and expect them to pick up all the sound in the room. No, don't buy those. So instead, buy any of the ones on the screen here. You want it to be omnidirectional. So see where it has the darker, I'm sorry, not omnidirectional. You want it to be cardioid. Do not buy omnidirectional. Do you see where it has the black circle drawn around it inside the gray circle? So the heavy dark line is actually what makes it cardioid. That's where it's only going to pick up the sound to the sides and front of it. It's very directional. It's not omnidirectional, it's directional in that it's picking up what's in front and to the sides of it. Just like a shotgun microphone here, the Rode microphone that you could plug into the top of a camera or a phone. And just like the one you see on the right with the circular wind screen in front of it, that would be for a studio, that would be super directional, that would be the one that only definitely records very direct sound from the speaker in a studio. What we will be using are called lavalier microphones, and those are very directional as well. They will only pick up the sound that's coming directly at them, not behind them or not all around them. They're very, like the diagram here, they're only picking up the stuff within that dark line. So we'll be using these lavalier microphones, and we'll either be chaining them together. Some of the microphones can connect to one another, or we'll be using a splitter where they can plug into the splitter, and then so each speaker will be wearing their own microphone to pick up clean audio from each speaker, not just one microphone that you're handing back and forth that's getting bumped around, or not just one microphone you're holding between the two of you and hoping it picks up sound. No, each speaker will get their own lavalier microphone, and we'll work on practicing with that in class. So now that I've harped on microphones a little bit, and hopefully you're only going to use microphones to record your sound from now on in this class for podcasts, that would be great. You don't want to get a sound that you have to do a lot of editing with and try and hope you can pull out the background noise or hope you can clean it up. Definitely use microphones. Okay, so for chapter 2 also, I wanted you to get an idea of the gear we will use in our class. We're using the iographers with the iPads. There's a website, iographer.com, if you're curious about the types of microphones and things that they sell. You can go on their website, go under the audio accessories, and just look through what they have that works with iPads and phones. So we have some shotgun microphones, but we will be using the lavalier microphones. With the iPads, we'll be recording the sound into GarageBand, and then we will take it out of GarageBand. You can leave it in GarageBand and edit it on the iPad, but we'll need to share the equipment quite a bit this semester, so you won't be able to hold on to the iPad to do the editing. So you're going to take it out of out of GarageBand and put it into Audition. Adobe Audition is free to you through the Adobe Creative Cloud for students here at UNL. So very important early in the semester that you are getting your Creative Cloud account set up and Adobe Audition downloaded to your computer. If for some reason you can't get Audition and it's not working for you, there's also a free online editing program that would work just fine called Audacity. So these are sort of the gear and setup that we will be using this semester, and we will get our hands on it and work on it in class time. All right, so moving to Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is about preparing for your first podcast. So we've talked about who's our target listener, what is our mission, what are our goals, what is our topic area, what's streaming science about. Now, what do? You're ready to sit down and record your first one. So we are going to record some podcast audio at the beginning of this semester to practice with a friend or a classmate or a family member so that you can get some practice using the equipment before you actually sit down during your interview with the scientist for the first time and hope that it works okay. You need to practice before you go into the field. So preparing for your first podcast, if you think you want to run your own podcast someday and not just work on streaming science in class with me, there are a lot of roles that go into producing podcasts. Sometimes it could be one or two people filling all of these roles, or it could be a staff of people. It depends on funding models and who's the employer and all that stuff. But the production roles of podcasting include a producer, a reporter, an editor. The producer is lining up the content, scheduling the interviews, getting stuff online on a consistent basis, lining up maybe funding from advertisers, that sort of thing. The reporter is actually researching the topic, writing the interview questions, conducting the interview, and then the editor is the one who is cleaning up the audio, putting the intro and outro and music on it, and putting it in the right file format and getting it online. One person could easily do all of these jobs on their own, but that, is going to be tough. You might not have the time to deliver a podcast weekly if you were doing it on your own. You might have to do it bi-weekly or monthly or something like that. So you need to think about what would be your model for having this go. For streaming science, we're only producing the podcasts one semester a year, and we're all taking on these roles. You will be the producer, reporter, and editor for your 2 podcasts, right? So you're doing all 3 roles for your 2 podcasts, and then we share them throughout the 2 semesters after they're produced. So this semester, I'm still sharing across the streaming science website and social media the last few podcasts that we created this time last year. So we produced enough content that I share it throughout the next year on sort of a bi-weekly basis through each semester. This chapter also says know the mission and structure of your podcast. Have that nailed down before you record the first one. Is your podcast topic and mission of the podcast very narrow and specific, looking at only big data research, and you're only going to talk to big data scientists across the country, and you have a year of interviews planned out around big data? Or is it more complex? I like to think of streaming science as having a complex mission and structure. We're more about introducing you to scientists that are working on things impacting your everyday life. So big data falls under that. Women in STEM falls under that. ag econ and climate change and the different topics we have done fall under the more broader and complex mission of, behind the scenes science. So make sure you kind of have some of that in your mind as you're formulating your questions and things that you will do to put together your podcast. Establish a workflow. The chapter really talks about staying organized. If you're going to produce a podcast for a year, 2 years out, constantly having a schedule, constantly having a grid of what things are in production, which things are in research, which things are in editing, and constantly be organized. Pitches. This talks about the importance of pitches. If you're working on a podcast team or with yourself, or if you're trying to get someone to fund a podcasting idea you need to have a great pitch. You need to explain why the topic is important, why your podcast is important. Read through that part of the chapter to understand the value of pitches. You will research and line up topics and guests and always be on top of lining that up. You will want to do a pilot podcast. So our pilot podcast this semester is going to be you doing sort of a mock interview with a classmate, family member, what have you, and practicing what it's like to sit down and do an interview and use the equipment. But a real pilot would be us doing a real sample podcast with a scientist and seeing how that goes right out of the gate. The development cycle, stay on top of that, from research to editing to posting online, and always know and be organized and know where you're at in your development cycle of podcasts. Okay, so that's the main highlights from chapters 2 and 3 for the weeks. For week 3, just remember you need to read those chapters, continue to research QLSI, start listening to some of the previous streaming science podcasts, and do online activity 2 by January 30th. All right, I hope everybody has a great week 3.